89%. That's how much the profit fell at the company that owns Omega, Tissot, Longines, Breguet, and Blancpain in a single year. Not 89 million, 89%. From 219 million Swiss francs down to 25. And those are the Swatch Group's own published results, not mine. Another name on this list is cutting staff right now under a chief executive brought in to turn it around. And the one sitting at number one still has boutiques on every luxury street on Earth, still sells watches every day, and posted a set of numbers that takes a moment to read properly. These are 6 Swiss watch names in serious trouble in 2026. And if you're about to buy one, or you've already got one sitting in a drawer, you need to understand what that actually means. Because when a watch brand starts to shrink, it isn't the board that pays for it. It's you. In service costs, in parts availability, and in what the thing is worth when you go to sell it. No brand loyalty here, and nobody is paying me to say nice things about anyone. And I want to be straight with you before we start. None of these companies is about to vanish. That's not what this is. Several of them make genuinely superb watches, which is exactly why this matters. This is about direction of travel, about what happens to owners when a brand shrinks around them. Everything here comes from the same place. Export figures published by the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry, company financial results, official statements, reporting from the watch trade press. Where I couldn't verify a number, I've left it out or told you it's disputed. There's enough that's genuinely documented here without anybody having to make things up. Let's start with a brand that had every advantage and still couldn't find a reason to exist. Number 6. Rado was created to be the technology brand. That was the whole idea, and it was a good one. While everyone else argued about movements, Rado went after materials. Scratch-proof ceramic. High-tech ceramic before anyone else was using the phrase. Cases that looked like nothing else in a display window and genuinely did not mark up. And I'll say this properly because it matters. The watches aren't bad. The ceramic work is real. The designs are distinctive in a market where distinctive is rare. And the movements underneath are proper Swiss automatics from the same group that supplies half the industry. Here's the problem Rado has never solved. And it's the problem that kills every brand built on a single technical idea. Ceramic stopped being exotic. Everyone uses it now. Omega uses it. Rolex uses it on bezels. Micro brands sell full ceramic cases for a few £100s. The one thing Rado owned became a material you can buy from a catalog. And when your entire identity is a material, and that material becomes ordinary, what's left? Now, I'm going to be careful here, because I could not find a published brand-level sales figure that proves a collapse at Rado, and I'm not going to invent one to make the story tidier. Swatch Group does not break out results by brand. What I can tell you is what the market shows. A brand with no clear position takes the hit on resale every single time, and Rado sits in the most exposed part of the entire Swiss market, the middle. Too expensive to be an impulse buy, not prestigious enough to hold value. That's not an opinion about the engineering. It's arithmetic about the second-hand market. So if you're looking at a Rado, don't worry about the watch failing. Worry about what it's worth in 3 years. Number 5. Tissot. Now, this one is different, and it's the one that genuinely bothers me. This isn't a brand nobody wanted. This is the brand that put millions of people into their first real Swiss watch. Tissot was the badge you bought precisely because you didn't want to think about it. Proper Swiss movement, sensible price, available everywhere, and nobody could tell you that you'd overpaid. If someone ever told you to just get a Tissot for your first good watch, you know exactly what I mean. And I'll defend that reputation, because it was earned. The PRX alone brought more new people into watch collecting in the last few years than most brands manage in a decade. So here's what should concern you. Tissot's core promise was Swiss quality at a price that made sense, and that promise has stopped being unique. Microbrands now sell watches with the same Swiss movements, often literally the same Solida or ETA calibers, with sapphire crystals, better bracelets, and a lower price. Japanese brands undercut from the other side with in-house automatics. And Chinese movements have got good enough that the price floor for a decent mechanical watch has dropped through the basement. Tissot's promise hasn't got worse. It's just stopped being special. When your one selling point is being the sensible Swiss choice, and somebody undercuts you on sensible while using your own supplier's movement, you are in real trouble. And here's the industry-wide number that tells you the squeeze is real. In 2025, Swiss watch exports fell 4.8% by volume, 740,000 fewer watches, bringing unit output down to roughly where it was in 2020, when the factories were shut for 2 months. Value fell only 1.7%. Volume fell 4.8%. Read those two together. The industry sold far fewer watches and protected the money by raising prices. That works for a while. It does not work forever. And the brand that gets hurt first is the one whose entire pitch was that it wasn't expensive. Number 4, Longines. Now we get to the position nobody wants to be in. Longines has genuine history, one of the oldest continuously operating watch brands there is, with a heritage catalog most companies would go to war over. The Spirit, the Legend Diver, the Heritage line, real watches with real provenance, and it sits in the single most dangerous square meter of the entire Swiss market. Above it, the luxury tier is consolidating. Buyers with serious money are concentrating into fewer and fewer names, and those names are pulling further away every year. Below it, the value tier is exploding, with better specifications arriving at lower prices every season. Longines is in the middle, which used to be the safest place in watchmaking, and is now the worst, because the mid-luxury buyer is the one who thinks hardest. The person spending $1,500 to $3,000 on a watch is not buying on impulse, and not buying on status alone. They research, they compare. And when they compare, they find that the money goes further in either direction, down to something with the same movement for half, or up to something that actually holds value. Now the fair bit, because this needs context. Longines is not failing on quality, and it is not disappearing. It remains one of the larger volume brands in Swiss watchmaking, and several of its recent releases have been genuinely well received. But being squeezed from both sides simultaneously is not a bad quarter. It's a structural position, and structural positions don't fix themselves with a new dial color. Number 3, Breguet. I need to be clear about this one, because it is not what you might assume. Breguet is not a brand nobody buys. Breguet is arguably the most historically important watchmaker that has ever existed. Abraham Louis. Breguet invented the tourbillon. He invented the self-winding mechanism as a practical device. The Breguet hand and the Breguet numeral are named after him because he drew them and everyone else copied. Marie Antoinette owned his work. Napoleon owned his work. Churchill owned his work. There is no watch brand on earth with a stronger claim to actually mattering. And that is precisely what makes this the story of an institution being hollowed out. Because for years now, Breguet has been widely reported within the industry as an underperformer inside the Swatch Group, a brand carrying the highest prestige in the portfolio and not converting it into the sales that prestige should command. Swatch has changed the leadership at Breguet more than once, trying to fix exactly that. Now, I'm going to correct something you'll hear repeated everywhere, because it isn't true and you deserve accuracy. Breguet is not being shut down. It is not for sale as far as any confirmed reporting shows. Swatch Group continues to invest in it and continues to release serious, expensive, technically ambitious pieces under the name. The honest version is this. The brand is intact. The heritage is intact. What's contracting is its position in a market where the buyers who can afford a Breguet are increasingly choosing 3 or 4 other names instead. And here's the part that matters most for this video. Breguet sits inside the group we're coming to at number 1. Its performance is not separable from that group's numbers. And those numbers are the reason this list exists. What it means for you as a buyer is simpler than the headlines suggest. The watches are exceptional. The heritage is unmatched. But you are buying at the top of a market that is narrowing, and a brand that struggles to convert prestige into demand, is a brand whose resale depends on a very small number of very specific buyers. Number 2. Breitling. And now we arrive at the one with hard current documented evidence. Breitling, aviation heritage going back to the 1880s. The Navitimer, which is one of the genuinely iconic watch designs of the 20th century, and was worn by pilots when it was still a working instrument rather than a fashion object. Under Georges Kern, Breitling did something almost nobody manages. It repositioned. It went from a brand associated with enormous, aggressive, 1,000-meter chronographs to something considerably more wearable and considerably more modern. Commercially, for a while, it worked. Here are the facts as reported. In 2026, Breitling has been cutting staff. The reductions have included positions in human resources, marketing, and sustainability, as part of a broader cost-cutting drive under Kern to revive a business employing more than 2,000 people globally. That is not a rumor. That is reported restructuring at a company of that size, in a year when the industry is already under pressure. And there is a structural detail underneath it that most coverage skips. Breitling is not a family company, and it is not publicly listed like Swatch. It has been through private equity ownership, which means, unlike its Swiss-owned peers, it carries debt service obligations that have to be met regardless of what the market is doing. Think about what that means in a soft year. A publicly listed Swiss company with no debt can absorb a bad 18 months by taking a smaller profit. A company with financing obligations cannot. It has to find the money, and finding the money means cutting. That's the difference between a brand having a difficult year and a brand having to restructure during one. So if you're considering a Breitling, understand precisely what you're taking on. The watches are good. The Navitimer and the Super Ocean Heritage are genuinely excellent, and I'd own either. But a brand cutting costs under financial pressure is a brand where boutique networks, service turnaround, and warranty support are the first things to come under review. And those are exactly the things you only notice 3 years in. Number 1. The Swatch Group. And here we are. The one that should genuinely stop you. Because this isn't a fading badge, and it isn't a brand nobody buys. This is the largest watch group in Switzerland. It owns Omega, Longines, Tissot, Rado, Breguet, Blancpain, Hamilton, Certina, Mito, Glashütte Original, and more. It owns ETA, which supplies movements to a substantial share of the entire Swiss industry. Half of this list is inside this company. Start with the money. For 2025, the Swatch Group reported a net profit of 25 million Swiss francs. The year before, that figure was 219 million. That is a fall of 89% on sales that themselves fell 6% to 6.3 billion francs. Read it again, because the shape matters. Sales fell 6%. Profit fell 89%. That gap is the whole story. It means the cost base did not move when revenue did. It means fixed costs, boutiques, staff, marketing, manufacturing capacity built for a bigger market stayed exactly where they were while the money coming in fell away. A near 90% profit collapse is not a rounding error. It is a structural hit, and it has reached the factory floor. Swiss watchmaking employment fell by around 835 jobs in 2025, the first decline since the post-COVID recovery. But that number understates it, and here's why. More than a quarter of Swiss watch companies have been using Kurzarbeit, the short-time working scheme where the state covers a large share of wages for reduced hours. Swiss policy extended it to 24 months, so the industry is absorbing weak demand in hours rather than in headcount. The job losses look modest because the state is paying to keep people employed while they work less, and the clock on that is running. Kurzarbeit is not permanent. When those 24 months expire, companies that have not recovered have to make a decision they've been deferring. Now, the supplier data, which is the one nobody covers, and the one that tells you where this goes next. Movements exports, not finished watches. The components shipped from suppliers to brands before anything reaches a shop. We're down 14.1% by volume in the first 5 months of 2026. Finished watch exports over a similar stretch were down low single digits. Movements down 14. That is the order book. That is brands telling their suppliers how many watches they expect to build. When the component tier falls 4 times faster than the finished goods tier, the brands are planning for less, not more. But, and this matters, now the fair bit, because a video like this can leave a false impression, and I'm not going to do that. The first half of 2026 came in at 12.8 billion francs, down 0.7%, essentially flat. India grew 39%. Mexico is growing strongly. Secondary market prices rose 4.9% in 2025, after falling 6.1% in 2024 and 10.7% in 2023, which means the resale bleeding has stopped. And the big American decline you'll have seen in headlines is largely a base effect. Brands front-loaded enormous quantities of stock into the United States ahead of tariff changes, which makes the following year look catastrophic by comparison. Measure against 2024 instead, and the American number is actually up. The Federation itself describes 2026 as broadly stable. So this is not the Swiss watch industry falling over. It is a correction, and a correction that is being felt very unevenly. Which brings us to why. Why all of this at once? It isn't 6 separate stories. It's one story with 6 casualties, and there are 2 forces pulling in opposite directions. The first is the top end pulling away. Luxury spending is concentrating. Buyers with real money are consolidating into fewer names, and those names are largely not on this list. When the top of the market gets narrower and richer, everything below it gets thinner. The second is competition from underneath, and this is the part most people haven't grasped. The technical gap has closed. Chinese movements have become genuinely reliable. Japanese brands build in-house automatics at prices Switzerland cannot approach. Micro brands buy the same Swiss calibers from the same suppliers, put them in cases with better specifications, and sell direct with no boutique overhead. A Swiss brand in the middle is now competing against a watch containing its own supplier's movement, sold for half the price, by a company with a fraction of the cost base. That's the mechanism. Luxury consolidating from above, capability arriving from below, and the middle getting crushed between them. And the brands that were already weak, the ones built on a single technical idea, the ones whose only pitch was sensible value, the ones carrying debt into a soft market, break first. What that means for you. 3 things, and they're worth more than any spec sheet. First, check the group before you check the watch. A good watch from a brand under pressure is still a poor buy, because in 5 years, you're the one hunting for a service center and taking the hit on resale. Find out who owns the brand and how that owner is doing. Second, watch the boutique network. This is the early warning nobody checks. Ask how many authorized service points are within reasonable distance. Then ask how many there were 3 years ago. If that number is falling, servicing gets slower and more expensive, and you'll feel it every year you own the watch. Third, be realistic about resale. The middle of the Swiss market is where depreciation is steepest, and it has got steeper. If you're buying at $1,500 to $4,000 expecting to recover most of it later, check what the same reference actually sells for used before you sign anything. 6 names, 6 warnings, and every one of them sitting in display cases across the world right now, being sold as though none of this is happening. Right. Before you go, 3 quick things. First, tell me in the comments which of these 6 surprised you most. And I mean genuinely surprised, not the one you already suspected. Because I'll be honest with you, the one that got me wasn't Breitling. Everyone's seen restructuring stories. It was the movement number. 14% fewer movements shipped in 5 months. That's not consumers changing their minds. That's the industry telling its own suppliers to build less. I read that figure twice before I accepted it. And if you own one of these watches, I especially want to hear from you. Has the value dropped faster than you expected? Have you waited longer than you should for a service? Has your nearest authorized center quietly closed? Put it in the comments. because that's the real evidence. Owners telling the truth about what ownership is actually like will help the next person far more than any figure I can read off a spreadsheet. Second, if this was useful, hit like. It takes a second, and it decides whether this reaches somebody standing in a boutique this weekend about to spend 4 figures on the wrong name. Third, subscribe. This is what we do here. No sponsorships from brands. No press samples. No being nice to a manufacturer because somebody sent me a lanyard and a buffet lunch. Just what the numbers actually say and what it means for the money in your pocket. Right? That's your lot. Buy with your head, not the badge.